They thought I'd give up the land my family had built over 3 generations just because a bunch of rich newcomers wanted to turn it into a golf course? Laughable. What's truly surprising is how a land transfer document appeared with a signature I never made. But they had no idea they were messing with a former NASA electrical engineer. This is a story of how I turned 20 acres into an impenetrable fortress, and the electric fence was just the beginning. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I checked them during my lunch breaks while preparing for the upcoming court hearing. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning when my quiet life imploded. I was enjoying my coffee on the front porch of my farmhouse, watching the sun rise over the eastern fields. The same fields my grandfather had plowed with horses, my father had modernized with his first tractor, and that I had maintained after retiring from NASA. The ranch wasn't much by Texas standards, just 20 acres of decent land with a modest house, a barn, and enough space for a few horses in my workshop. But it was mine, or so I thought, until the mail arrived. Among the usual bills and junk mail was an official-looking envelope from something called Meadow Vista Estates Homeowners Association. I nearly tossed it with the junk mail since I'd never joined any HOA, but something made me open it. The contents made me spill my coffee. According to this letter, my property was now part of the newly established Meadow Vista Estates development, and 15 of my 20 acres had been designated as community land for a planned golf course and recreation area. Even more shocking, they included a photocopy of a document with my signature, agreeing to this transfer, a signature I had absolutely never provided. "This has to be some kind of mistake," I muttered, examining the signature closely. It was similar to mine, but clearly forged by someone who had seen my signature but couldn't replicate the slight tremor I'd developed in recent years. I immediately called my neighbor, Miguel, the only person I'd consider a friend since moving back to manage the ranch after my wife passed away 5 years ago. "Bob, it's happening to everyone on this side of town," Miguel explained, his voice tense. "Development company Harrington Enterprises has been buying up all the small farms and ranches. The ones they can't buy? Well, seems like they found another way." By noon, I was standing in the reception area of a glossy new office building on what used to be the old Thompson farm. A sleek plaque on the door read, Meadow Vista Estates, HOA. The receptionist looked up with practiced cheerfulness that faded when I slapped the letter on her desk. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge of this nonsense," I said, keeping my voice level but firm. Within minutes, I was ushered into an office where a woman in her mid-40s sat behind an expensive desk. Her nameplate read, Evelyn Harrington, President. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand you have concerns, but I assure you everything is perfectly legal," she said, gesturing to a chair I didn't take. "The documentation has all been properly filed with the county. As for your remaining 5 acres, we're prepared to make a very generous offer." She slid a document across the desk that showed a figure that might have looked impressive to someone who hadn't researched local land values, but I knew it was less than half what the land was worth, especially with the planned development. "This is fraud," I stated flatly. "I never signed anything, and I'm not selling any part of my property." Her smile tightened. "Mr. Caldwell, fighting this will only cost you money and time. The development is happening whether you participate willingly or not." That evening, Miguel informed me about an HOA meeting scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community center, a meeting that apparently all members had been notified about, except me. I decided to attend uninvited. Slipping in quietly at the back, I watched as Evelyn and a sharp-dressed lawyer introduced as Andrew Peterson presented elaborate digital renderings of Meadow Vista Estates, complete with luxury homes, a clubhouse, and a sprawling golf course. I felt sick as I recognized my barn and pastures transformed into the 7th and 8th holes of their planned golf course. When they opened the floor for questions, I stood up. "I'd like to know how you plan to build on land you don't own, since I never agreed to any of this," I said loudly, causing heads to turn. Evelyn's professional mask slipped for a moment before she recovered. It stated that I was in violation of HOA regulations by restricting community access to the designated portions of my property and that fines would begin accruing immediately. Sarah read through the document with growing indignation. This is ludicrous. They can't enforce rules of an organization created through fraud. But we both knew that legal battles take time, and in the meantime, they could drain my retirement savings with these daily fines. After the deputy left, I made a decision. Sarah, keep working the legal angle. I'm going to handle this my way too. I walked out to my workshop, a converted barn where I'd set up my electronics equipment after retiring. Opening cabinets that hadn't been touched in years, I pulled out boxes of components, tools, and notebooks from my NASA days. Sarah watched from the doorway, concern evident on her face. Dad, what are you planning? I held up an old notebook filled with circuit designs. They think I'm just some old farmer they can push around. They forgot that before I came here, I designed electrical systems for equipment that could survive the harshest environments in space. Now I'm going to design something to make sure trespassers remember they're on private property. The next morning I was up before dawn, researching local ordinances on private property boundaries and security measures. As I suspected, there were no regulations prohibiting electric fences on private property, as long as proper warning signs were posted. The county had restrictions on voltage levels in residential areas, but my property was still zoned agricultural, which gave me more leeway. I smiled as I sketched out my plans. 25 years designing electrical systems for NASA hadn't been wasted. I knew exactly how to create a deterrent that would be legal, safe, but extremely effective. I drove into the city to purchase supplies: high-gauge wire, insulators, solar panels, batteries, and various electronic components I couldn't fabricate myself. The clerk at the agricultural supply store raised an eyebrow at my list. "Planning on keeping something dangerous in, Mr. Caldwell?" he asked conversationally. "No," I replied, "planning on keeping something dangerous out." By mid-afternoon, Miguel had joined me, bringing his truck and 2 of his sons to help with the heavy lifting. "You sure about this, Bob? Those Harrington people have connections." I nodded grimly. That's exactly why I need to protect what's mine, while Sarah works on the legal battle. Miguel looked worried, but didn't argue further. The fence design was my own modification of standard agricultural electric fencing, with several key improvements. First, I incorporated a sophisticated sensor network that could detect cutting attempts or climbing. Second, I designed variable voltage settings, a legal deterrent level for normal operation, but with the capacity to automatically increase slightly, still within legal limits, if the sensors detected tampering. Third, I connected the entire system to a central control unit in my workshop that would alert me to any breaches. Finally, I added cameras at strategic points, their feeds directed to both my computer and Sarah's phone. It took us 3 days of intense work, but by sunset on the 3rd day, the entire perimeter of my property was secured. I had just finished installing the last warning sign: "Pulp, pretty property, electric fence, enter at your own legal and physical risk," when a black SUV pulled up my driveway. Evelyn Harrington stepped out, accompanied by 2 men in polo shirts with Meadow Vista Estates logos. "Mr. Caldwell," she called, her voice carrying that false cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I secured the sign and turned to face her. "Protecting my private property, Ms. Harrington, something I'm fully entitled to do under state law." She approached, but stopped a prudent distance from the new fence. "This barrier violates multiple HOA aesthetic guidelines. I'm going to have to insist you remove it immediately." I couldn't help the cold smile that spread across my face. "I'm not part of your HOA, Miss Harrington, regardless of what forged documents you may have filed. And even if I were, Texas property law allows for security measures on private land." Her professionally maintained composure cracked slightly. "This is an intimidation tactic, and—" "Golf course is just the public-facing part of this," Jennifer explained when she came to interview us at the ranch. "Based on my sources, what they really want is to rezone this entire area for commercial development. The community spaces will eventually become shopping centers and hotels." She was initially skeptical of our claims about forged documents, but after examining the evidence Sarah had gathered, including preliminary results from the forensic document examiner, Jennifer became convinced. "This could be the story that breaks open everything I've been investigating," she said, scribbling notes furiously. Meanwhile, Evelyn was conducting her own campaign. Several neighbors reported receiving personal calls from her, warning them about the dangerous electrical weapons I had installed, and suggesting that my erratic behavior was cause for concern. She told the Johnsons that, "You've become mentally unstable since your wife died," Miguel reported after a community potluck I had declined to attend. "Said you were a threat to neighborhood safety." The strategy was clear: paint me as dangerous and unbalanced to undermine my credibility before the legal proceedings began. As Sarah worked with our lawyer to prepare our defense against the HOA's lawsuit and our countersuit for fraud, I monitored the security system constantly. The cameras caught several drive-by observations of my property, but no one dared approach the fence. Then, around 2 a.m. one morning, the security alert— "Perhaps you should also share this with the county sheriff and the state police. This is now a criminal matter involving public officials." After Ramirez left, I reviewed the footage again, focusing on the mayor's assistant. When Sarah sent me this video, I had to stop and look closely at one of the intruders. It couldn't be, but it was definitely Mayor Wilson's assistant. This wasn't just about a greedy HOA anymore. This was a conspiracy reaching to the highest levels of city government. Jennifer's investigative instincts proved correct when she uncovered documents revealing that Harrington Enterprises had entered into a confidential agreement with Blue Sky Resort Group, a major casino and hotel development corporation based in Las Vegas. "They're not building a golf course, Bob," she explained, spreading the documents across my kitchen table one evening. "They're planning a massive casino and resort complex. That's why they need your land specifically. Its elevation provides the perfect view of the valley and river that would be the centerpiece of their marketing." This revelation explained the urgency and the increasingly aggressive tactics. Casino development was heavily regulated in our state, and local approval often depended on community support. If residents knew the true nature of the development, there would likely be significant opposition. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "State law prohibits casino development within 5 miles of protected cultural sites." She looked meaningfully at Sarah. "If Cody's application for historical protection is approved, it would legally block the entire development," Sarah finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. "No wonder they're panicking. They're racing against time." The next day, Sarah appeared with Cody before the County Historical Commission to expedite the application for protected status. The preliminary evidence was compelling enough that the commission issued a temporary protection order pending full review, effectively placing a 90-day hold on any development plans for the area. The HOA's lawyer, Andrew Peterson, requested an urgent meeting with Sarah the following day. They met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the neighboring town where neither was likely to be recognized. Sarah returned, looking both troubled and satisfied. "He offered a deal," she reported. "You keep 10 acres, including the house and barn, plus substantial financial compensation in exchange for dropping all complaints and keeping quiet about the casino plans." When I asked what she had told him, she smiled. "I told him we'd need to see evidence that they're addressing the claims of all the other landowners they've defrauded, not just us." Peterson's desperation revealed more than he intended. In his eagerness to salvage the deal, he let slip that the casino project was already behind schedule and over budget due to our resistance, and that major investors were threatening to pull out if the situation wasn't resolved quickly. He also inadvertently confirmed that Mayor Wilson had personally expedited permit approvals in exchange for promises that the development would include facilities bearing his name, a clear ethics violation at minimum, and potentially criminal corruption. Armed with this information, Jennifer prepared what she called her nuclear option article, a comprehensive exposé detailing the casino plans, the forged documents, the mayor's involvement, and the coordinated harassment campaign against me and other holdout landowners. The night before publication, she came to the ranch with her editor to review every detail one final time. Once this hits, there's no going back, her editor warned. Harrington has enough money to bury our little paper in lawsuits. Jennifer nodded resolutely. We've triple-checked every fact. It's time the public knows the truth. The article hit the streets and online platforms simultaneously the next morning. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Local residents, many of whom had supported the development based on promises of community spaces and increased property values, were outraged to learn about the casino plans. Religious leaders, business owners concerned about the impact on local establishments, and parents worried about having a gambling center near schools all voiced their opposition. By noon, a crowd had gathered outside City Hall demanding answers from Mayor Wilson. The mayor hastily called a press conference that evening, flanked by Evelyn and several city council members. He categorically denied any impropriety, dismissed Jennifer's article as fake news and character assassination, and vowed to investigate the spread of malicious misinformation. But the damage was done. As he spoke, Evelyn's normally composed expression was strained, her face pale. When a reporter directly asked about
discussing how to get rid of the Caldwell problem and detailing their knowledge of the forged documents, most damning was Wilson explicitly stating that he would handle the regulatory obstacles in exchange for naming rights to the casino's main convention center. Sarah stared in disbelief. This is everything we need, but will it be admissible in court? It doesn't matter, I replied. What matters is that Jennifer publishes it right now. As if on cue, Jennifer called to inform us she was going live with a streaming broadcast outside our property covering the city's apparent attempt to seize private land by force. I told her to stand by for additional breaking news and sent her the key footage. Within minutes, her crew was broadcasting both the confrontation at our fence line and the damning video evidence of corruption on split screen to thousands of viewers. Officer Ramirez arrived just as the first bulldozer approached our fence line, accompanied by several patrol cars, and surprisingly, officers from the county sheriff's department and state police. He approached the city crew supervisor and presented a document. This is a temporary restraining order prohibiting any action against this property pending judicial review, he announced loudly for the benefit of Jennifer's cameras. Additionally, I have warrants for the arrest of Mayor James Wilson and Evelyn Harrington on charges of conspiracy, corruption, and fraud. I'll complete the story for you now, beginning from where Chapter 7 left off. The city workers, many of whom had seemed reluctant from the start, immediately shut down their equipment. As they dispersed, we learned that the judge had been shown Jennifer's broadcast evidence in real time, prompting the immediate intervention. The confrontation that had been brewing for weeks dissolved in a matter of minutes, replaced by the surreal sight of police officers escorting city officials away from my property rather than me from it. Within hours, the district attorney's office, now under intense public scrutiny, announced that they were opening a formal investigation into the entire Meadow Vista Estates development process, including the allegations of document forgery, corruption, and abuse of power. Mayor Wilson was seen being escorted from City Hall to a police cruiser, his face ashen. Evelyn was arrested at the HOA offices while apparently attempting to shred documents. But the most surprising development came when Andrew Peterson contacted Sarah directly, offering to cooperate with investigators in exchange for leniency. You don't want to trust him, I warned Sarah when she told me about Peterson's offer. A man who turns that quickly will turn again. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I don't trust him, but his information could be valuable. He claims to have evidence of a much larger land acquisition scheme, not just here, but across 3 neighboring counties. This caught my attention. If Harrington Enterprises had been replicating this fraud on a larger scale, there could be dozens of family farms facing similar battles without our resources or technological advantages. The preliminary hearing was held just 3 days later, with the courtroom packed to capacity. Sarah represented us brilliantly, presenting not just our evidence of forgery and harassment, but connecting it to the broader pattern Peterson had revealed. Cody Redbird testified about the historical significance of the land and how many targeted properties had cultural importance to indigenous communities, suggesting this wasn't just about prime real estate, but potentially about circumventing preservation regulations that would have prevented development. Evelyn, appearing without her usual polished confidence, attempted to shift blame entirely to Wilson and her husband, claiming she was just following directions with no knowledge of the fraudulent documents. Wilson, by contrast, threatened to expose half the city council if prosecuted to the fullest extent, suggesting the corruption extended far beyond what we had uncovered. The judge, clearly disgusted by the entire affair, issued a preliminary ruling in our favor. My property rights were affirmed, the HOA's claims nullified. Both Evelyn and Wilson were denied bail pending trial due to the seriousness of the charges and risk of evidence tampering. As we left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters, one shouted, "Mr. Caldwell, will you be taking down your electric fence?" I couldn't help but smile. The fence stays. It's a reminder that what's worth having is worth protecting, and that sometimes the best defense is a good electrical engineer. The crowd laughed, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the tension begin to ease from my shoulder. The battle wasn't over, but we had won the decisive engagement. Peterson's cooperation revealed an operation far larger than we imagined. Operation Green Valley was a coordinated effort by Harrington to acquire land across multiple counties, using tactics similar to those used against me. Dozens of